Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is not often that I attend an event and within 15 minutes of attending the event, I realize that my deep, passionate, and abiding love for snails will be satisfied for the rest of my life. I'm delighted that I came for this evening for no other reason than for the snails, and you all now know how I will be voting at the end of this particular occasion. I do hope that the 10 to 15 million naira figure that the lady suggested was sufficient to complete the business. If it was, then she might have an investor who might consume half. Who might consume half of the snails himself. On another serious note, I am delighted to come here. YALDA was founded by some members of the Harvard African Students Association, and in 1978, 4 of us, my wife Maima, who is from Ghana, a gentleman from Kenya, a gentleman from Nigeria, and myself were the founding members of the Harvard African Students Association, out of which YALDA emerged. This will be the 35th anniversary of the founding of that association, and it gives me enormous pride and satisfaction that out of that event, so many years ago, that an organization such as YALDA has emerged, has done so well, and has brought all of us together this evening. Thank you very much. Now to Indidi Muneni, who is very modest and very polite. I'm also delighted to speak after her. I met her first when I attended the first conference of the African Business School Association of Harvard Business School. I was tremendously impressed with her, and I felt that we had something in common in the sense that as a founder of an African association for the university, I was meeting the founder of an association at the business school, and I knew that at that moment that I would hear great things about her, and I'm delighted that she has fulfilled all the expectations that I saw in her at that time. Congratulations. As far as YALDA is concerned, I'm delighted that organization has gone beyond Harvard. I'm delighted that it has gone beyond Nigeria. I'm delighted more than anything else that it has gone beyond the all largely male organizations that dominated the university societies in those days, and now, from the way it looks to me, it is run by women, and therefore it's more likely to be successful than by men. Congratulations. Now, there is a certain narrative, there's a certain story about Africa, about Nigeria. It's the story of South Africa, it's the story of Kenya. It's a story that you will read in the newspapers a lot. And it's a story that talks about increasing levels of corruption, the disorganization of government, a worsening security situation. It talks about the lack of a maintenance society or maintenance culture. It talks about how our education system is not what it used to be. It talks about increasing levels of crime. It talks about how the levels of inequality in wealth are getting larger and larger, and it goes on and on in that particular vein. It is probably the case that optimism in Africa is directly proportional to the distance that the observer has from Africa itself. And you would be discouraged if that narrative of Africa was not a narrative that you find depressing, that you find very sad, and that makes you wonder whether or not you should continue in those investments that you seek to do, and whether or not it is not time for you to join the bandwagon, leave this continent, and go elsewhere. I would like to say to all of you, and it's something that I think is very important, that you should not allow that narrative to dominate your thoughts, and you should not allow that narrative to in any way determine what you wish to make of your lives. Because there is another narrative about Nigeria, another narrative about South Africa, another narrative about Kenya, and that narrative seeks to look at where those countries were 20 to 30 years ago, and seeks to compare where we were before and where we are now. And if you look at Nigeria in particular, and you go back 20 to 30 years, let's look at what the country was like then. In those days, we had a military government, not a civilian government. We had government newspapers, not private newspapers. There was hardly any computerization. We had inefficient government-controlled banks. It was impossible to bring any items into this country without licensing from a government. There was very little entrepreneurship. The levels of education that you had were much lower than we have right now. And at that time, even 20 years ago, when I first made my sojourn into the United Bank of Africa, I remember securing a $10 million investment in the bank, and I remember being congratulated by the Minister of Finance, the Governor of the Central Bank, and the head of the stock exchange. A $10 million investment in Nigeria at that time was regarded as extraordinary. So when you look at that, you have to say that we are in a much better situation than we were 20 years ago, and the likelihood is that we will be in a much better situation in 20 years' time than we are now. So do not let one narrative dominate your thoughts to the extent that you feel you should not take action in realizing the dreams that you have. From my own experience, I want to share with you some thoughts. The first, I have never regretted attempting too much. I have never regretted aiming too high. And I have never been in a situation where I've asked myself the question, Kim, maybe you have bitten off too much. Maybe you are attempting to chew too much. I have only regretted those occasions when I have been satisfied with too little, where I have aimed too low, and where I have given up too early. The major message that I wish to communicate to all of you this evening is the following. Reach for the stars. Do your very best. The worst that will happen to you is that you will fail. And I want to assure you that in my career, I had many failures. The thing about failure is that you learn a lot from it. It toughens you. You learn lessons from it. And you are emboldened to go forward, to try again, and then to succeed. Once you succeed, you'll be amazed at how your failures never ever get written about. and in the presence of many McKinsey consultants who are all here today, not to suffer from a very chronic disease called analysis paralysis. That is the illness that falls upon you when you feel the need to have no gaps in your knowledge, to continue to search for every last piece of data, to analyze and analyze and analyze because you fear the unknown. Now, the unknown is not necessarily a bad thing. And at some point, in any entrepreneurial venture that you undertake, you will have to make a leap into the dark. You will have to take the risk with incomplete information, and you'll have to go for it. Don't be frightened or be scared of that. The most important thing, I think, in business is a certain attitude. And it is an attitude that starts with the assumption things will happen to me, strange things will happen. Things will happen that are not part of the plan or were not supposed to happen. But I am confident that I can cope. Nothing that happens to you in and of itself is bad. It is how you react to it. And as long as I react to the various challenges that befall me in any entrepreneurial adventure that I am in, I can turn that situation into a great success. Hearing the speakers today, I left, or rather I leave, with a tremendous sense that the next generation of businessmen and women in this country will be far superior to me. I want you to know that that does not give me any degree of concern whatsoever. It makes me feel delighted, because the definition of a progressive civilization is that the next generation should do better than my generation. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen,